Elden Ring has brought the Souls PvP community to the brink of ruin, and Shadow of the Erdtree did nothing to improve the situation. People are bored, standing issues won't be addressed, the game is over. And I've come to accept that reality. There's only so much to be done, and I have to take it for what it is. But that reality has me thinking a lot about a question I think about every time something frustrates me within Souls PvP. Why don't more games have invasions? Invasions are the lifeblood of Souls PvP. Dedicated arenas are a great idea, but without a serious investment in their application, they're a far cry from a reliable matchmaking system, rendering them little more than a trite novelty. Instead, it is invasions that keep people engaging because they are, in more ways than I have ever experienced, the most reliable form of PvP. By their very nature, you can impose PvP on a player whether or not they're ready. Of course, the player must meet a number of obscured criteria, many of which easily qualify as opt-in approvals, but the fact remains that the invader starts the invasion. And that's excellent for activity. I'm sure you've played basically any other game with optional PvP before, and avoided it whenever the mood didn't suit you. I play old school RuneScape, and I never go into the wilderness unless I absolutely have to, because I'm shit at the PvP. I am actively avoiding PKers because I value my time over theirs, obviously. I don't want to hand over my hard-earned items just because I don't know how to fight back, and the game largely indulges my cowardice. But, in the weirdest way, it makes me long for the days of what is now known as RuneScape Classic, where I would be forced into PvP all the time, so that I might be forged in fire and not so resigned to death. Souls PvP rules at this. Making someone engage with a system they don't understand is core to their teaching process, and PvP is the highest bar a game can set. It's one thing to trial and error your way through a PvE boss like Margit, but it's another thing entirely to win against an opponent you're only going to get one chance against, who could bring practically anything to the fight. And by that same metric, having to be prepared for anything can make you a better player. Not only that, but it can give you insight into what's possible for a player to do. Forced PvP, especially when you have limited control over when and where, is probably the best way to get players acclimated to PvP, especially when your system is based on intuitive action combat. So it makes me wonder why other games haven't adopted the formula. There are quite a few Souls-likes, each imitating some key aspect of a beloved series to varying success, but virtually none take on PvP, let alone invasions. The closest title I can think of is Lords of the Fallen. I should say I have not played the new Lords of the Fallen, but I hear mixed things to say the least. I am considering giving it a try though, so if that's something you'd like to see on the channel, let me know in the comments. And as one of the only Souls-likes that actively facilitates invasions, it demonstrates what I see as the major obstacles. At first glance, and I am speaking from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't seem like a very interesting game. Nothing about its world or aesthetics or all the little details that make a fantasy game captivating are calling out to me. Adding to those concerns, it's a reboot, something I am not particularly fond of. In point of fact, the only thing about it that is interesting to me is its inclusion of PvP in a Souls-like format, which is probably a huge part of what makes that inclusion so polarizing. Anyone who's coming to the game specifically looking for that Souls PvP fix is going to have more than a decade of comparisons to work with, meaning if the game can't match or exceed expectations, the road is that much harder to walk. I also see that it has somewhere around 300 to 500 players on Steam at a time. Compare that to 2016's Dark Souls 3 boasting 10 times those numbers today, and my concerns grow. Then again, Dark Souls 3 may have sold 10 times as many copies, so the data is far from conclusive. But there is a core issue with activity regardless of reason. Invasions are great for finding matches, but those matches need to be there to find in the first place. If no one is playing, there's no one to invade. Early reviews of the game suggested it had a long way to go before it could be considered on par with its Souls competitors. It's been over a year since, but even if Lords of the Fallen has improved a lot post-release, and the developers are receptive to player feedback, it doesn't seem like it's making a dent for those players who want the true FromSoft experience. That is to say, players who want what Souls PvP should be. And I'd say it's that perception of what Souls PvP should be that actually makes it so difficult for other studios to even want to touch. Because it's not just that the games let you invade other players, it's that they're really great games that let you invade other players. Speaking plainly, I get that a lot of players hate invasions. I think they should give them a chance. I've pleaded my case many times, but I understand why they hate them by only existing on one side of the spectrum. But Souls games are good enough for them to keep getting invaded. Some avoid invasions by playing offline, or, in the case of the all-too-generous Elden Ring, avoiding multiplayer, but many do not avoid being invaded and simply deal with it. They might complain, they might disconnect, they might act with unreasonable cowardice, but they're participating in their own way, because the game is just that good. It's worth the frustration. It's worth the risk. Souls-likes already have to contend with a world-class developer when they throw their hat into the ring. I cannot imagine the pressure of building a game knowing you'll be compared to the likes of Hidetaka Miyazaki and the FromSoft team. They aren't perfect by any means, but their success time and again has made every other industry standard approach look downright foolish. And if the vision for your game that is heavily inspired by Souls games doesn't explicitly include PvP, avoiding it makes things a lot simpler. You don't have to worry about the predation of your more casual players by veterans. You don't need to figure out peer-to-peer networking. You can ignore how weapons function against players and focus on PvE balance. I often tell a friend of mine who loves Monster Hunter how I'd be more inclined to play if they had competitive hunts. While my friend agrees that it'd be cool to have, neither of us thinks it would fundamentally change the appeal of the game. I understand catering solely to my specific interests is not a good financial strategy. You need to make a good game that appeals to your broad audience. And making a good game requires vision and focus. If PvP isn't included within those parameters, adding it can hurt more than it helps. Elden Ring is a great example. PvP was not a priority, instead existing as a holdover from Dark Souls 3. Without a clear vision for its inclusion, it's become a degraded and frustrating experience. Not without its merits, mind you, but it is less than it should be, and specifically for a lack of focus. Invasions were first added to Demon's Souls as a way to facilitate a unique obstacle for players that would shake up a level on a whim. Miyazaki had a vision for how they would function and specifically why he wanted to include them, which made them work. In isolation, attacking another player has a clear draw for those interested, but without a strong consideration for the player being attacked, the mechanic can become little more than griefing. Elden Ring linking invasions to cooperation was a natural progression of how invasions had evolved in Dark Souls 3. As much as I feel making the system opt-in hurts the experience, I won't argue players have their preferences, and those preferences matter. And as much as I know there's a healthy middle ground between letting hosts control every aspect of their experience, abusing what little PvP we're allowed, and constant oppressive invasions by players far beyond your skill and experience, I get why the former takes precedence. I get why other games don't want to bother with a mechanic they don't understand. I suspect most studios who want to capitalize on the Souls formula don't actually engage with PvP and have never thought of it as crucial to the experience. I also think that's why so many fail to recapture the essence of a Souls game. They can't see the whole picture. Because what the industry lacks is not imitators, it's vision. More games don't include invasions because they lack the ability to see below the surface. to know what gives player conflict meaning, and to understand the value of the tension of being murdered by another person in a power fantasy. I imagine that lack of vision is largely due to the monumental task of making a modern game. Budgets are higher than ever, and expectations have grown with them. Publishers hold developers on a short leash, acquiring and closing studios on a whim. Job security is fleeting, and the only metric by which you are judged is sales. It's nothing short of a miracle that Miyazaki and FromSoft have been able to work in relative isolation and actually achieve their creative visions. And it's for that exact reason that the prospect of Sony buying out FromSoft is such a terrifying idea. Sony's refusal to interact with or relinquish the Bloodborne IP, their contempt for players by commissioning a remake of Demon's Souls and demanding they buy a PS5 to play it. They are a corporation of the worst sort, and, barring an entirely hands-off approach, they could be the end of FromSoft as we know it. So I understand why other developers don't include invasions. Either the idea has never occurred to them as something they understand or value, or the risks will almost always outweigh the rewards. If a mechanic causes even the slightest friction with a broad audience and might turn players away, then that mechanic could hurt profits. We are at a point in the gaming industry where there's never been more money involved, meaning creativity takes a back fucking seat. Invasions are among the most creative game modes I've ever experienced, and no other company matches FromSoft in style or substance. Let me know in the comments what other games you wish had invasions, or what games you think I should play that have something like them. I've tried Salt and Sacrifice, but I've never finished it, though I'd be happy to give it another go. Like I said before, Lords of the Fallen is on my list, but I'd love input from others who have thoughts on how worthwhile it is. And if you have a take on Sony acquiring FromSoft, leave a comment about that too. It's the worst news I've received all week, and 2025 is shaping up to be an absolute nightmare. Like the video if you liked it and subscribe for more. Until next time, thank you for watching.